Call to order the February 28th, 2023 meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, in-person attendance of members of the public and board members will be permitted. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting live may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26 or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceeding as soon as possible after the meeting. If members of the public would like to participate in any public hearings but not attend the meeting in person, please email your question or comment prior to or during the meeting or hearing to Jean Enright at JENRIGHT@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. So for board members as well as members of the public, the ability to do remote or hybrid meetings has been allowed through the changes to the open meeting law as dictated by the state legislature. The allowance for remote or hybrid meetings ends at the end of March, I believe. It's due to expire. As far as we're being told that there are no current plans to extend that. So just FYI. So unless the legislature decides to act and extend that, we will only have remote meetings through the end of next month, just for people's planning purposes. Okay, we're going to go to continue. We don't have any new public hearings, correct, Jean?
We do.
Oh,
The zoning bylaw amendment?
zoning bylaw
Yeah.
amendment, okay. But we prefer to start with the continued public hearings?
Sure.
Okay, we're going to start with the continued public hearings, then we'll have new public hearings on some zoning amendments. We'll discuss another potential zoning amendment that we're trying to, that we'll try to get in for town meeting as well. And we'll do the minutes, and that's going to be our agenda for this evening. So, start with 0 Turnpike Street, Middleton Farms LLC. Request to continue until March 21st, 2023. So that public hearing will be continued until that date. That one is going through processes both here in North Andover and in Middleton. So that's some of the reasons for the delays, is that there are many boards under multiple jurisdictions that need to be have a say in that matter. Okay, 1701 Osgood Street, Extra Space LLC, application for site plan review, amended corridor development district and parking loading special permit under Article 8 supplementary regulations, Part 1 off-street parking and loading, Part 3 site plan review, Article 16 corridor development district, and Article 10 administration of the North Andover zoning bylaw. The applicant proposes construction of a 3-story self-storage facility building adjacent to a previously approved 3-story self-storage building, along with parking, loading, landscaping, and associated improvements. Project is located in the Corridor Development District 3, CDD3 zoning district. We had an initial hearing on this matter on December 6, 2022, and are now hearing it again, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Jean, why don't you tell us where we stand, what's been done since our last time in this public hearing? Please let me know if there are any public comments that have come in, and then we'll turn to the applicant.
Sure. So as a reminder, the project proposes a second self-storage facility on the site. The applicant has responded to all stormwater peer review comments and the fire department comments. The existing septic will be removed. The project will tie into the new sewer line in Route 125 when available. The project itself is not before Conservation Commission. However, the applicant did file a request of applicability, requesting permission to tie the site sewer line into the existing sewer line stub adjacent to the site in Osgood Street. This was approved on January 11, 2023. A parking and loading special permit was applied for. This is to allow for a reduction in required loading spaces for the new building from 3 to 2, as well as a reduction in parking spaces for the site from 25 required to 21 parking spaces. The proposed parking has been modified as requested by the fire department. The initial plans depicted 12 head-in parking stalls along the front of the proposed building. The parking has been revised to provide 7 spaces in combination of head-in and parallel parking, which provides an additional 4 feet of pavement for fire truck maneuvering. Since the last meeting, additional field survey data has been obtained in response to stormwater peer review comments. Snow storage areas have been added to the plan. A hydrant was moved closer to the proposed building, and a second standpipe was added per the request of the fire department. and a separate erosion and sedimentation control plan was added to the plan set. Waivers were requested for the fiscal and community impact statements, landscaped side setback, and for a full traffic study. A 5-foot landscape strip is required for side property lines within the CDD3 zoning district. The proposed development portion of the lot complies. There is an existing condition in the south property line where the pavement is 2 feet from the property line. A contractor's yard abuts this portion of the lot. VHB provided a traffic memo which states that weekday AM peak trip generation per hour and the PM trip generation hour will result in 9 vehicles entering the site and exiting the site. The request for waivers also includes a request to eliminate the need to file the traffic information with the MIPA office, given the low traffic generation for the proposed use and given the project will not trigger a MIPA review. The applicant has reached out to one residential abutter that had contacted the planning office to review the plans. The abutter did not express any concerns, and a draft decision has been prepared tonight for your review. Presentation material was submitted today, so if you want to go through presentation material, it'll also summarize a lot of the comments that I just gave.
Okay. Good evening. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chair and other members of the board. For the record, John Smolak, the firm of Smolak and Vaughn, attorney for the applicant. With me this evening is Greg Sisko of Storage and Distribution Group, who is the owner and applicant's representative, as well as Michael Dryden of Allen Engineering. And I think that we haven't been before the board since December, but I think Gene summarized all of the changes or adjustments that have been made. Just as background again, the applicant is proposing a proposed new 47,000, approximately 47,000 square foot warehouse and storage facility, self-storage, to complement the existing 50,000 square foot self-storage building that was approved by this board and constructed back around 2000. And so, as Gene indicated, we've made some adjustments, particularly as a result of discussions with the fire department, which wanted some additional maneuverability between the existing and the proposed building. And so as a result, there are 12 90-degree parking spaces that were located in front of the building. Those have been modified to reduce that to 7 parking spaces, with a number of those spaces moved to be as parallel as opposed to 90-degree spaces in order to provide additional maneuverability and access for the fire department for emergency access purposes. So that was probably the major adjustment, which wasn't a significant adjustment, resulting in the number of parking spaces being provided as 21 where 25 are required. And we've requested a parking reduction special permit to deal with that. And based on the VHB analysis, and as Gene had indicated, the peak parking demand might be 9 spaces or nine trips. And we have 21 spaces, and so it's 2 to 3 times more than would otherwise be required for the demand for the entire site. So we feel that there's more than adequate parking as is, given the very low usage and very low parking rate and low intensity of usage of the self-storage facility.
So I think the two things that I had remembered that I just wanted to kind of lock up were the landscaping and buffering and the lighting. So maybe if you could just at least do those parts of the presentation. I don't think we need the whole thing. And then if anyone else has any specific item or slide that they want to go through, then we can do that. But if you could just at least talk about the landscaping and the lighting.
Sure. Thank you, John. Again, for the record, Michael Dryden, Senior Project Manager, Allen Engineering. Sheet C5 of the plan set, if it is up there, depicts the landscaping. This will work as well. This is an illustrative plan. As Attorney Smolak mentioned, let's talk about the existing building first. There's a 5-foot strip along the southern border, the northern border, that meets the requirement. There's about a 180-foot section, if you can see the gray paved area, where we don't comply with that 5-foot requirement. So a waiver is requested for that. Other than that, the existing facility completely complies with the landscaping requirements. In terms of the proposed building, The light green that you see are lawn areas. The dark green represents the existing forested areas that will remain as buffer. And that what we did you'll see the back right corner, yep, the L shape, we added evergreen plantings there just as sort of additional screening to the residential dwellings that are located quite far from the corner of the building. That would be the only area where there might be a glimpse of the building, so we took it upon ourselves with the initial submittal to add landscaping in that area. The lighting design is quite simple. You'll see here, you can see the photometric symbols along the front and side of the building. These are wall pack fixtures. They're LED fixtures. They're mounted at a 15-foot height. It's very low-level lighting. It won't be perceived. Again, there's pretty significant vegetative buffers around the back of the site. This will complement some of the existing wall packs that are on the back of the existing building. Again, all low-level wall packs, which are directed directly down to the pavement. All dark sky compliant.
Okay.
And I've not received any comments.
Okay. Sean, any questions or comments?
Just one quick question on the lighting. I'm assuming that it's automatically that they turn off at a certain time, or are they on constantly? I'm just curious.
I'll have to defer to you on that one.
Yes.
Greg.
That's what it is, DG. They would be actually on timers, so they would
Okay.
shut down at a predetermined time at the evening. We just have to remember that this building is actually set into the hillside as well, so you won't, you, as he mentioned, you have the natural tree buffers, the additional trees, and then just the way that the building is set down, but otherwise it can be programmed and timed appropriately.
Okay, great, thanks.
Kelly?
I don't have any additional questions, no.
Thank you. Peter?
No, all set, thank you.
Okay. Then can,
Any butters?
yeah, is there anyone in members of the public here that would like to make any comments? Not seeing any, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, so can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion's made. Can I get a second from Kelly or Peter?
Second.
Seconded by Kelly. All in favor. Peter?
Aye,
Kelly?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
I vote yes. So the public hearing is now closed. Now we're going to review a draft decision.
Eitan, could I interrupt?
Yes.
So we should state in the record, both Kelly and Peter are attending remotely, and for attendance purposes, Sean Kevalon, Eitan Goberg, Kelly Cormier, and Peter Boynton are present.
Kelly and Peter are remote, and John Simons and Alyssa Koenig are not present today.
Thank you. So as far, we're reviewing the decision, right?
Yes.
So the sign, the approvers on this, obviously will change to Sean, and Alyssa and John will be deleted.
Right.
Right. Sean, you're authorized to vote on this. You've been here for you were here at the previous meeting, and as the associate, you can vote on a special permit when we do not have enough members to vote. John, remind me, this same owner, same manager,
Yes.
didn't need additional employees, correct?
That's
As I recall, okay. Would construction begin this spring or summer?
I think
Be later towards summer. It's all dependent on the sewer system on Osgood Street.
Ah,
And,
okay.
We have a septic system which is in the footprint of the building. So
Gotcha.
once that's in place, we'll be.
You're gonna tie into the,
Yep, the sewer that's being laid in Osgood Street, they intend to tie into.
The sewer is installed, but the pump station is what potentially could hold things up a little bit in order to activate that system.
good timing, okay.
supply chain issues.
Unfortunately.
I think that Amazon building's gonna be done soon, right, John?
I think it is.
Good. Okay. Can we get a motion to approve the special permit for 1701 Osgood Street?
So moved.
Motion made. Can we get a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Kelly. Peter?
I apologize for my delay here. Aye.
Not a problem. Kelly?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
I vote yes as well.
Again,
so-
Peter and Kelly remotely.
Peter and Kelly voted remotely. Sean is a special voter, and I vote yes, so it is approved with our 4 votes. Okay,
Thank you very much.
what's up?
Thank you.
Continued public hearings. 1701 Osgood Street, Extra Space Storage LLC.
We just did that one.
Oh, sorry, we
Next
just did that one. 14 Second Street and 149 Main Street, Second and Main LLC. Applications for a site plan review, parking inclusionary housing requirement in downtown overlay district special permits under Article 8 supplementary regulations, Part 1 off-street parking and loading, Part 3 site plan review, Part 13 inclusionary housing, Article 18 downtown overlay district, and Article 10 administration of the North Andover zoning bylaw. The applicant proposes redevelopment of the property into a mixed-use development contained within a single building, including ground floor commercial space along with 2 floors of residential units above the first floor. A total of 24 residential units are proposed, along with parking, landscaping, lighting, and other improvements to be located on a single lot consisting of approximately 28,000 square feet by combining parcels known and numbered as 149 Main Street and 14 Second Street. The property is located within the general business district and downtown overlay districts.
You want me to provide an update since last meeting?
Yes, please.
So stormwater peer review is complete. There's one conditioned recommendation, and that's that the O&M plan needs to be updated to reflect the vendor's recommended servicing of the trench drains. The plan should be signed and by the property owner after the revision. It is recommended to condition additionally soil testing by a soil professional beneath the subsurface infiltration system. Also, there was a concrete slab encountered in the area where the subsurface stormwater system is proposed. A recommended condition of approval is that the concrete slab be removed in its entirety, as well as any fill encountered beneath the subsurface stormwater system. The plan does note that it will be removed and additional soil testing and possible replacement of soil if necessary. The applicant has provided an updated traffic and parking utilization report, which reflects additional traffic counts taken on a Sunday, additional traffic analysis with a focus on parking within a 200-foot radius of the site. The site layout was revisited, and slight adjustments to the building design were made, which results in 2 additional on-site parking spaces. A note has been added to the plans to recognize the need to install 2 EV charging stations to comply with building code. In response to the board and a butter comments made at the last meeting, the applicant has met with the owners of 159 and 161 Main Street, as well as with the representative of St. Gregory's Church. The adjustments made as a result of these discussions will be reviewed tonight at the meeting. Surrounding building heights have been surveyed. Those heights will be presented at the meeting. And I'm still awaiting acknowledgement from the fire department that their concerns have been addressed.
And what were their concerns, do you recall?
They wanted a formalized swept path analysis, which has been provided, and a snow storage or removal plan, which has been provided in the updated O&M plan.
Okay, so we're just waiting for the,
Yeah, just,
okay, for the fire department to say yay or nay or have
Yeah.
comments on that. Okay, all right, turn to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, other members of the board. For the record, John Smolak, of the firm of Smolak and Vaughn, representing the applicant, Second and Main LLC. With me this evening are members of the project team, some of whom you'll hear from this evening, including Hillary Holmes, Max Polanco, as well as Sean Suking with Langen Engineering, who will discuss and touch upon traffic, civil, and landscaping matters that you'll hear shortly. Also with us are project architects from JTA, including Chris Brown and Jim DeBurrow. And I think that Kyle Young, representing the applicant, is available remotely as well. For this evening's presentation, what we'd like to do is run through a brief introductory summary of actions taken since our last meeting. Also then have Langen run through the adjustments that have been made to the plans, both with respect to civil engineering matters as well as landscaping, and then discuss, then get into a more detailed discussion on traffic based on the new data that was collected and the scope as well. And then we'll touch upon architectural design and building height, as Gene had indicated. So as described in my February 23rd letter to the board, and as Gene has indicated, we did meet with several of the abutters on site to walk through the proposed improvements and the proposed location of the improvements, and certainly let those folks who were present speak for themselves. But I think the more material change was, and you'll hear a little bit about this shortly, is the change in the rooftop deck away from where the residences, those single-family residences are, and closer to the corner of Main and Second in that corner, again, to sort of maximize the distance between that roof deck and the single-family residences. As to traffic, at the board's request, and as Gene has indicated, we took additional Sunday trips based on input from the board, and we've also taken additional counts within a 200-foot radius of the site itself to show what's happening basically within this sort of micro area of the downtown area. And as you recall from our last hearing, we presented data on parking utilization for a much broader study area, which extended from the Waverly Main Street intersection running along Main Street, past the site, past both St. Gregory and St. Michael's Church, to Main Street and Merrimack Street. And again, that was a much more broad analysis of the traffic. And this evening, what we want to do is dig a little deeper into the more details surrounding the immediate site. And so, in terms of architectural design, our architects were able to make some adjustments to the building footprint that enabled us to find an additional 2 spaces on site. So we now have 46 spaces on site, where 44 are required for the residential uses. And you'll hear a little bit more about that. And based on abutter feedback, we're requested to take another look at the exterior of the building, and so we'll have a further discussion on that with a couple of alternatives that'll be presented to you shortly. And also cross-sections detailing height. We've taken shots of the heights of various buildings within the immediate vicinity, and those will be presented to you as well. And that, again, was requested by the board to provide that information. And with that summary, I'd like to just turn the discussion over to Hillary Holmes.
Great. Hi, Hillary Holmes with Langen Engineering, site civil engineer for the project. And if we could just progress the slides, I can just point out some of the site plan changes. I think this is the existing site that we're familiar with in terms of the bank and the residential property with the parking lot. Then we have the butters that we had met with on site. Their properties on the upper part of the screen. Go to the next slide. So there's not, from this bird's eye view, there isn't a huge change in terms of what you saw last, other than what John Smolak had mentioned, is you can tell under in the covered parking area where we have the tandem spaces, the building used to jut out for the stairs. And so we were able to straighten that out, rotate the stairs, and now we added 2 additional tandem parking spaces. So there's 24 covered spaces. The site the uncovered spaces that are towards the upper part of your page are still remain the same. The other change that we had made was to the driveway at Second Street. In our initial submission, we were holding the existing driveway curb cut width, which was like 29 feet. Based on town comments, we reduced that to 25 feet. So in terms of the bird's eye view, that's really like sort of the noticeable changes. And we're going to touch a little bit on, some of the butter coordination items relative to the retaining wall along the upper property line, as well as the lighting and the location of the transformer. But those we'll cover in a little bit in a couple more slides. You can go to the next slide. So this is the utility plan. As Gene Enright had said, in terms of our stormwater review, there were a couple conditions that the reviewer had recommended, but we were able to address all of their comments. In terms of the stormwater design and utilities, there were no changes to the design in order to address those comments. The infiltration system that's gray and shaded, that's to the right corner of the site, that's the area that Gene Enright had mentioned that a concrete slab was encountered, which we had added notes to the plans for the removal of it. And that's the area also that for construction that we would be doing some soil testing and providing that data to ensure that the system functions as the design is intended. Here, the next slide. This is the turning movement we had provided to the fire department, showing movements, from Water Street and Main Street into the site. Again, we have that one-way traffic through the site and then turning out onto Second Street, back towards Main Street. And I'm going to hand it over to Ashan Sue King to touch a little bit more on some of the butter coordination items. I think one of the main items that we were able to talk through with the butters at the meeting was really orienting them to where that wall is going to be located on that side, on the north upper part of the screen. That dimension from the property line to the face of the wall is 5 feet. And so being able to actually see that on the site, to see where that falls, and understanding that the top of that wall, when you're on the abutter side, is going to remain at their existing grade, and really what we're cutting is on our side of the parking lot. We're dropping the grade for the parking lot down. So the maximum reveal for the parking lot side is going to be 5 feet, and then it sort of tapers towards Main Street, where it gets a little bit less to 3 feet and then tapers to grade. And then as you go towards the back of the site, it'll taper from 5 feet to 3 to 2 and then to grade. So I think that was really key, because I think there was some confusion that on the butter side there'd be like a wall coming up, and really it's going to be a wall at their grade and then a 6-foot fence on top of that. And we were also able to orient them to where the transformer was going to be located. I think when they had initially looked at the plan and seeing it on site in terms of where it was going to be shifted, they felt like it was going to be much closer to their property than it actually is going to be. So having that sense for them and kind of orienting them to where that would be located also helped. And we also ran through in terms of where the lights are going to be located too. So we'll touch on that next.
All right. Ashan Suking, landscape architect with Langen. Good to see you both again. So this is the landscape character board, similar to what you saw last time, and Hillary touched base on a lot of the site plan changes. We pretty much showed in this one specifically the wood board fence that's going to be going on the abutter side. It's going to remain a wood, probably like a black locust or something local to that sense, but either cladding it on both sides, so there's really no back to that with the rails going in the between. And then the retaining wall remains the same, viewable from the 149 building.
Eitan, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Can we interrupt for questions, or do
Yeah,
you want to
no.
wait till the end?
Go ahead.
Could you just go over that fencing, that there won't be a backside? Just give me
Yep.
a little more detail and
Yes.
what you mean by that.
Sure. So yeah, typically in fence
And,
construction.
okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yep. Typically in fence construction, there's like the posts with the boards running horizontally, which
Yep.
is what we're proposing. So we could look at, proposing those boards to be mounted on both sides of the posts. So
Gotcha.
you don't really get like a backside. So it's more.
So in other words, both sides of the fence would present the finished side of the fence. Both sides would be finished.
That is correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And if I could add just one item in terms of the fencing, in discussions with the abutting landowners, we also suggested that in terms of the height of the fence and the wall, that we'd be willing to work with them in terms to adjust that height, because some of the fencing was approaching some of the windows, and so if the abutting landowner wanted to sort of slightly adjust it so it's lower or higher, we're willing to do that as well, so.
Okay.
Okay. And getting to the lighting, it mostly remains the same. Just wanted.
Just 1 second. So we will be taking public comment, but I think it's, instead of interrupting for public comment, just if you have something, just save it till the end, because it might be something that gets answered as we go through this. But we're happy to go back to any topic that you have a question or a comment on, okay? Okay, got it.
Yeah, thanks. Getting to lighting, yeah, everything mostly remains the same, dark sky compliant. All the actual light source that you see in the 3A fixtures on the north side is pointing inwards to the site. And then the A on the very left, next to the transformer, we're looking at kind of figuring that out as we work with the electric company for the location, but I think in that general area is where it's going to be going.
So I have a question here again.
Sure.
Can you, my question refers to that diagram or image you had of the parking lot fixture.
Yep.
Can you show that again, Gene? There we go. So underneath the site diagram on the left side, a parking lot fixture. So I think that image is trying to show us both sides of the parking lot fixture. And am I correct that it is not showing the orientation? It will not be pointing up like that. It'll be pointing straight down. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, that image just represents the fixture. How it's going to actually be on site is going to be mounted 15 feet up, pointed inwards, kind of like a upside down L.
Right. And, you're using some degree of technical terms to describe the lighting here, and I'm not questioning the accuracy of your use of the technical terms. I think you're being quite accurate, but I'm not sure that the technical terms necessarily communicate to people who are not experts in lighting. Dark sky, no uplighting, whatever. Can you provide any additional description, sort of plain language, as to how these series of lighting will limit or tell us, will it limit or will it eliminate any light going beyond the property line to abutters?
Yep. So the A fixtures, we are using a house side shield. So that means there's an actual shield where the light source is. These are LED fixtures, not your typical, like the older ones that you see that might be more of a yellowish tone. So these ones have actual shields behind the fixture to block out any light that might spill backwards beyond the property line.
Very helpful. Now, in past proposals, if my memory serves, we've had some type of a diagram that not only shows the numerical looms or lumens, whatever the term is, but it shows an image of of almost like a ring of where the light will go, showing how far from the light fixture to what degree or percentage. Do you have any type of diagram like that shows how far the light will go beyond the fixture?
Yep, we have a photometrics plan that we have submitted.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was searching for. Another one of those very accurate technical terms. Thank you. Can you show that diagram?
Do you want me to show it now, or do you want to get through the presentation? I can do either.
Is it, Gene, is it elsewhere in the presentation?
It's in your packet, so it's a site plan.
I think it would be helpful to show at the meeting, unless that's disruptive. I'll leave that to Eitan to decide.
No, let's just do that now.
I just meant sequentially. Do you want to see it now?
No, let's just do it, and let's do it while we're talking
Am I
about
in
it.
the wrong?
That's
I'm
1701,
in the
yeah.
wrong thing.
Thanks, Eitan.
Yep. Lighting planting on the top. Yeah, I think there was.
Lights
there-
and planting?
Yeah, I think.
The LL.
Planting and lighting.
Okay.
Yes, right there. Yep, there it is.
There we go.
And can the presenter perhaps walk us through how we should be viewing and interpreting this?
Yeah, so the design of this, we have the three A fixtures, which are the parking lot light. They're lighting half of the parking lot. They're only at 15 feet high. And then what you see on the other side that's mounted on the building, on the other side of the driveway across the A's, are C fixtures. These are building mounted at around 14 feet, I believe, between the first level and the second level. That's kind of consistent throughout the driveway as you come in from Main and then coming out 2nd Street. Everything else that you see along the streetscape frontage, we have B fixtures. When you see the Bs, you see those like the decorative goosehead fixtures that's present throughout downtown North Andover.
Right.
We wanted to kind of repeat that character and kind of pay homage to what's there right now.
And can you just give us a plain language description? Each figure has a double line around it. What's the significance of the double lines?
So the double lines means the inside line is the 1 foot candle, and then the outside line represents 0.5 foot candles.
And how should we interpret a foot candle or a half a foot candle? How much light is that? Give us a reference point.
I would say 1 foot candle is what you would typically see in like a building entrance. That's just meeting IESNA, International Engineering Society of America safety standards. That's kind of to give you like the basics at nighttime. Most of the other lights might be turned off, but that building entrance is for safety, for egress. That's kind of where you put a
Sure.
1 foot candle.
Very, very helpful. So let's take an example of one of the A fixtures or one of the C fixtures. Can you give us a sense of, let's say you had a third line surrounding these fixtures, and the third line would be the point where only 5% of the light is visible. I mean, if I understand you correctly, the inner line is 100%, the outer line is 50%. Is that a roughly correct approximation of what you've told us? So how far onto the abutter's property would the line go from the A fixtures where there'd be only 5% of the light left? And would any of the C fixture lights extend onto the abutter property at that low level of 5% of light?
So I think, you know, what you see right now with the C, where that 1 foot candle, the outside line, that kind of goes where it shows. We don't have anything that shows anything less than 0.5.
Okay.
So you wouldn't really be able to see it, just because like the way it's mounted. But for the A's, you know, I see that, you know, there's the 0.5 a little bit, that's beyond, but we're not considering that 6-foot wall that we're about to put in also. That's going to block a good amount of that light.
So let me ask you this, will the height of the A lights be above or below the top of that 6-foot wall?
The height of the actual fixture,
Yep.
it will be above. It's 15
So
feet.
will the abutter side screen on the A fixtures, will the abutter screen extend from the light fixture down to the top of the wall in some way that's aesthetically pleasing and not just a, you know, a big ugly thing? Is that feasible?
I think that's something, yeah, it's feasible, but it's something we'd have to look at with the detailing of the
Yeah, and
fence and how it all comes together.
it may depend on just how much of the light is leaking over it. You know, it's really great to hear that you've got an abutter side light shield. Undoubtedly, that will have a positive effect, but if the height of those A fixture lights is above the top of the wall, there's probably still going to be a fair amount of light going into the abutter area. And what sort of creative solution could you come up with to get us down to the top of the wall without being hideously ugly or ugly in any respect? Thanks. Eitan, thanks for patient with these questions. I think I'm all set.
Okay.
Nathan, I just got one question. So if you go back, Gene, is there a D fixture?
Yeah, so the D is below, it's like under the building.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's just kind of
Like,
a recessed.
It's part of the
like-
building.
Okay.
Yeah, like in the garage, typical
Got
ones
it.
you see.
It's a wall back, right?
C is a wall.
Wall,
Yep.
wall back.
Yep.
So it's downcast.
Yep.
All right, so why don't we go back to the presentation and go to planting?
Yep. So for planting, yep, it mostly remains the same with what we have proposed. From the abutters walk, we talked a little bit about the transformer area. We have the switchgrass here. I noted that, you know, in the wintertime, if you don't cut it back, it still provides some kind of form and coverage in there. And then with that, it grows about, you know, from 2 to 4 feet. I would probably lean against on the higher side just because there's an open grade. It's not, you know, they're not limited to any type of soil volume in that area. And then for these graphic sections, you know, as Hillary talked about previously, the retaining wall will vary from the 149 building side, from flush condition all the way up to 5 feet, and then comes back down on either side. On top of that retaining wall, you see the 6-foot fence that's kind of consistent throughout both of the properties. Yeah, and based on the discussion that was previously mentioned, we'd be able to adjust the height of that fence depending on where it lays out with the window.
If there are no questions, we'd like to move on to traffic.
Yep. And if anyone if anyone who's here or wants to email in a question about lighting or screening or anything we've talked about, we can definitely go back to it. I just want to get through the presentation first.
Yep. Good afternoon, Maximo Polanco with Langen Engineering. I've been the traffic engineer working on the project. So I would say a briefly update, like John said, we've collected more data on Sundays, as we last discussed in the meeting. And as we discussed previously, the data that we collected initially was all the way kind of like covering the entire downtown area, but we collected additional data on 2 regular weekdays February 14th and 15th, just within a 200-foot radius of the site. So this slide is basically kind of like the same as the other one. The only main difference is here is that previously the building or the square footage for the commercial area was a little bit higher than what it is. So now with the 2 additional parking spaces that we were able to fit in the site layout, then it's a little bit less. So previously we only had like 40 peak hour trips, 41, and now we have 40 peak hour trips. So it's just because of that slight difference. The parking demand based on ITE did not change. We are still expected to have an average parking demand of 51 parking spaces during the weekend and 39 parking spaces during the weekday. The peak utilization, like we previously said, for the residential uses occurs between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. And for the commercial uses, as expected, it's between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m., which only has an overlap of 2 hours from 5 to 7 p.m. So knowing this, what we are proposing is to maximize the parking layout from the 46 on-site parking spaces. We want to designate 12 of those parking spaces to be shared between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. between the proposed uses. That way, the parking spaces will have a large turnover, and we don't have to rely 100% on the on-street parking spaces. The other thing that what we wanted to state is that because we're consolidating driveways along 2nd Street, right now the 149 site has 2 driveways and the 14 2nd Street site has 1, and all those 3 will be consolidated into 1. So we're able to fit 3 additional on-street parking spaces along 2nd Street that will be able to be used by the public. So if we go to the next slide, like we previously said, this is the original study area that we studied. In addition to this, in this same specific area, we collected data on Sunday, and we'll show you. I think one of the questions on the last hearing was that what is the breakdown between all of those areas about the usage of these areas, and we were able to break it down. So if we go to the next slide, you will see that this is the overall parking utilization. So if you see the highest peak remained during the weekend and was 75, but on Sundays, that's the additional data that we collected that is shown in purple. So if you see those peaks that occur at 8:30, 10:30, 12:30, and then at 5, between 5 and 6, those are the weekend mass from the church, and that's why you see those peaks. But in general, the average utilization for a Sunday was 19%, and the max, the peak utilization was 37% in the entire downtown area.
And in terms of that analysis, very few of the spaces within 200 feet of our site
Yep.
are within that analysis. Is that correct?
Correct.
It's an interesting commentary on the downtown use, just kind of as a slight aside, but look at Saturday night at 6 o'clock. There's nobody downtown or nobody parking downtown.
Correct.
Just interesting to note as a side from this that's just I mean, I've been downtown on a Saturday and it is pretty quiet, but I didn't realize how much less people there are than even a Tuesday or Wednesday. So just when we talk about, trying to revitalize the downtown, those kind of numbers kind of do tell a story.
Yeah.
So
on
aside.
this next slide, it'll show you basically a heat map of the average utilization of kind of like each segment. So if you see, what is clear from here is that the parking spaces that are on Water Street, just from Main Street to Merrimack, are basically not being used. So the average utilization is less than 20% there. And then most of the other parking spaces are between 40 and 60%, but none of them are being used on average more than 60%. The parking spaces that obviously are more used are more in line north of Main Street towards Waverly. Those are it's a more busy area and more occupied. So that is just for the weekday. And then the next slide, we're showing what is the weekend. So the weekend itself, so that's basically an average of the Sunday and Saturday that we collected. And it's, I would say, pretty much the same story. There's plenty of parking utilization, and that's why we were able to reconfirm that the average parking utilization of the downtown area is about 35%. So,
I just want to say, I really like the way these charts are set up. So, John, for future clients and stuff like this is really helpful. Not only just getting, I think first getting the overall numbers, but then really breaking it down into segments is actually, I find very helpful. And I know that was one of, I think, Peter's comments, and I hope it addresses it, but I think this is a really good visually way to understand where there may be problem areas or not. But I think for future, that's a really good way to,
Sure.
a good chart.
So,
thank you.
one of the other questions was specifically, what are the actual parking spaces within that study area? So if you see, this is our site in blue shown here, and basically we drawn in a 200-foot radius throughout the site and identified each of the parking spaces that are actually, so all of those number parking spaces were, for us, we were able to basically collect data on those 2 additional days on just those 46 parking spaces that are shown right now on the screen. So basically, every 30 minutes, we collected data from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. of each of those parking spaces to determine the utilization. So if we go to the next slide, we'll show how the proposed development will add those 3 additional parking spaces that are shown there in red because of the closure of the driveways. And then it will be able to grow those within the site. Instead of 46 within a 200-foot radius, it will be 49. But our utilization was based on only the 46 that are available on site. So based on that, if you see here, this is the peak utilization within a 200-foot radius of the site. So every parking space that is black, that's where the occupied parking space is under the peak utilization, which only occurred at 12 p.m.
For how long? What was the
It's
duration?
30 minutes, no longer than that. So every green space was basically the parking spaces, and this was just the peak. The next slide, if we go to the next slide, it will show the average. So this is the average of each of the parking spaces that we collected data. So if we see most of the parking spaces that are in the very close proximity to the site are in green. We have on Main Street, just south of our site, those 3 parking spaces that are in red, and then north of Main Street to the east side, there's 2 more parking spaces that are in red. So those are, in the days that we collected, those were utilized basically most of the day, so between 80 and 100%. But then all of the other ones are, I think it's just 4, 5 that are 60, 80, and then everything else is below 60. Like we said, the main interesting thing about this is that all the parking spaces that are within our site and in very close proximity to our site on 2nd Street, in front of our site along Main Street, and the 2 parking spaces on Water Street are completely, basically not being used. And that is just not even taken into account that Water Street extends all the way, has available parking spaces on Water Street all the way to Merrimack, like we had mentioned previously from our data. So what this shows is, and this slide, we didn't change it, is that if we take into account the parking spaces that are within a 200-foot radius of the site, the usage, it reconfirms that it's basically a 32% average use. And based on our ITE standards, what our demand is 51 parking spaces. We're providing 46 parking spaces. Plus, we know that from those 46 that are available on street, that only 30% of those are being used, which is basically only 16 parking spaces. So there's still 30 parking spaces available to be used, plus the 3 additional that we will be adding with the closure of the driveways.
So I guess, just to summarize, just the parking itself. The site itself requires a total of 84 parking spaces. And as Maximo has indicated, the residential demand is entirely met on site with 44 spaces. 46 spaces are on site and 44 are required for the residential use. And so with our projected commercial, ground floor commercial use, we are required to have 40 spaces. And so that's based on the parking table under the zoning bylaw. But when you look at the ITE peak utilization rates, as Maximo indicated, 51 spaces are required. That's the peak during the weekend.
Yep.
And so of those 51 spaces, 32 of those are residential, and 19 are commercial. And during the weekday, it's reduced to 39 parking spaces, where 26 spaces are residential and 13 are for commercial uses for on-street parking. And so, because of the low utilization rate on the on-street parking, there appears to be more than sufficient parking off-site to accommodate those additional parking spaces that are required for our proposed commercial use. And the reason why we're using, under the downtown overlay district, just as background too, the downtown overlay district allows the board to determine that you can change the location of parking spaces. In other words, move some of those parking spaces and count them on street. And those spaces that could be considered by the planning board are within the 200-foot radius, and that's why we discussed the 200-foot radius. And so, the standard is there that basically, provided that you're not impacting the usage of spaces by others, that in terms of utilization, that the standard can be met as a result of those.
John, how many, seems pretty clear, at least to me, that the residential use is contained within the on-site parking.
Yep.
And you might have a few guests here and there that would need to use off-site, so we'll do that. We'll say 4 or 5 additional cars maybe. What is the peak hourly trips for just the commercial?
So just like he said, it was 19.
19?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So at our peak time, 19 trips within an hour, correct?
So talking about trips or talking about parking spaces?
Trips,
Okay, so trips is different. So let me.
right.
So trips for the commercial only.
Mm-hmm.
It's 30, basically not 30, 28
Okay, so 28 is trips coming and going?
coming in and going. Yeah.
So 28 times someone's coming and leaving.
Yes. Not so not 28. Basically 14 coming in, 14 coming out.
Okay, so I mean, some of those might be people walking, right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
We
at
didn't
most
take into account any type of like pedestrian reduction or anything.
right, but I mean, so even if it's 14, that's 14 parking spots, and
Yes.
you're saying
Yes.
there's at least 19 or 20
There's
available
30 in the area.
up right within 200 feet,
Within 200 feet.
not
yeah.
including further.
Not including further the downtown area.
Okay, so that's the number I was looking for. Okay,
And there was a little bit of confusion last time because there was the overlap between the residential and commercial peak on site between, was it 5 and 7?
Yeah, 5 and 7.
And that occurs between 5 and 7 p.m., but the actual utilization rate off-site is like 30% or less.
Correct.
So there would be more than sufficient spaces to accommodate that particular time period, even though there is an overlap.
And that's the one reason of what those designated parking spaces that are expected to be shared, they only are going to be shared between 10 and 4 and not beyond that time limit because we want to avoid an issue. So an hour prior, then parking spaces should be empty for the residential use.
Yeah, so because of the fact that the peak residential use is going to be so low, it's going to be much less than the 44 or 46.
Yeah.
We're thinking that to further provide an additional measure to relieve on-street parking is to allow for some of the commercial to park on site during the residential off-peak hours between 10 and 4.
Correct.
So we've designated 10 spaces on site to allow that to happen, for some flexibility.
Okay. Any board member questions on parking, traffic? We'll get back to residential, so hold that one. We will definitely get back to it. I just want to get through the whole presentation. Peter, yeah?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the applicants for taking another look at the parking. Appreciate that work.
Okay. Architectural plans?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Jim DeBarrow from Joe the Architect. Good to see everyone again. I'll make it relatively quick going through some of the architecturals. A lot of the stuff's already been said. I just wanted to go through it again. So the update to the ground floor plane, as seen here, is what we've done is move the accessory stair that you see in the kind of bottom right-hand corner. We moved it over so that way we can fit 2 more parking spots. What that also does is it does take some space away from the commercial as well, which in turn helps with the parking demand and how much commercial space there actually is in the building. Other than that, there has been too much changes on the ground floor plan. We can go on to the next page here.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
So what was the I guess the net loss on the commercial space and square footage?
It was 227 square feet
Oh, okay.
of space lost. So the revised roof plan, as shown here, we did have the roof deck situated in the upper left-hand corner of the plan as shown before. We now have it in the lower left-hand corner, kind of on the corner of Second and Main now, which is out of the way of the residential abutters that voiced their concerns about potential view lines down. One thing to note about just the construction of the roof here and how the mansard is constructed is there's a pretty good parapet in terms of how high the roof actually comes up. It'll be very, very hard to see over, regardless of where the roof deck is. And that parapet's about a little over 4 feet from where you'd be standing on the roof deck. Going to the next.
I'm sorry, just a question on the roof deck. Is
Yeah.
the use for that residential or commercial?
It would be residential strictly.
Right, thank you.
Yep. The revised proposed elevations here, we did make some changes in regards to the abutter outreach in terms of the kind of more blocky side with that. There was a concern voiced that it was almost too modern, and we wanted to kind of tone that down a bit. So what we did was we took off some of the balconies on that side as well, so that way, made it a little more traditional and had a material change that involved changing it from a metal panel to either a board and batten vertical siding or a more typical hardy plank horizontal siding is what we would be looking to do for the updates on. If we could move forward to the next slide. We can go to the next slide as well. Some of the proposed renderings updated. We show here, as seen in this view, the horizontal siding as well as kind of pairing up the windows in a more vertical sense as well. There were some minor tweaks as to the entryway and kind of opening that up and kind of aligning it with that window as well to make it a little more like you want to know where an entry is to a building. That kind of helps round that out, that conversation. One thing to note about this view here is in the kind of bottom left-hand corner, you can see where we have those the bollards for the transformer as well as some grasses placed there as well that would help kind of shield that. This is a view from Second Street and Main Street on the corner there, showing that the dual mansard roof with the typical brick construction as well. This view is from Second Street looking down towards Main Street and how we have essentially on that right side where you see the tree, or on the left side where you see the trees, there would be parking spaces on the street there, and you can see in the background as well on the far right the surface lot parking. This view is from kind of from inside the parking lot, looking down towards Main Street. As you can see, the covered parking spaces allow for the residents to have tandem spots there, so that way, for the amount of the multi-bedroom units we have, it kind of covers it for the tandem parking, so it wouldn't be much of an issue with kind of assigning those tandem spots to like one household, perhaps. So it's not a big deal for, moving one car out to access another car.
Are the EV parking spots outside in the uncovered, or are they part of the covered?
We have both covered. Well, we're covered on both bases there with having EV spots for the surface lot as well as underneath.
Yeah, it makes sense for the underneath one to at least even just have potential hookups, or places where people could connect to electricity, even if you don't provide a actual EV thing, but just somewhere that if someone did that they could hook up.
Totally. And then one thing we've provided or wanted or proposing to provide it for the EV hookups is a certain Bosch hookup that has it's almost tentacle-like. It has like 3 or 4 hookups, so it can kind of be placed in the center and be serving 4 cars at once potentially. Just one thing to know.
Good idea.
This is the proposed finished palette that we were looking to use on our building here. Obviously, we're using brick for the vast majority of the building here. The window trim will be dark with some natural wood accents coming through, as you can see, kind of below, underneath the kind of arcade area that where you would drop off someone in the more square section of the building. The roof would be a slate-style roof. Any sort of railings for the balconies would be kind of a black aircraft cable railing that helps kind of fade away from a visual sense. And the fascia boards as well as trim boards would be of a darker sense. This option here shows option 1, which shows a more horizontal siding. It can be either cement board, hardy plank, any sort of mix of keeping a horizontal line. And the second option as shown. The second option, as shown, has a more vertical board and batten difference on that side there. Both of them are a darker tone of gray, so there's less reflectivity when it comes to if there were to be any sunlight shining on it, that would reflect less. And we want to also address the neighborhood height sections that we did here. These are some of the heights that were taken by Langen Engineering. As you can see, this kind of cuts east to west, where it shows 2628 2nd Street at a height of around 33.2 feet. Our building's at 42 feet, as well as St. Greg's across the street. Anywhere you see kind of lighter gray is where a road is. If you kind of look at the bottom piece, this kind of gray slices through it. That's where where there would be a passage of vehicles of some sort.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Gene, can you do any focusing on these slides? I've seen some previous slides in and out of focus. Can you do any focusing on this?
Perhaps zoom in, perhaps. There we go.
Is that what you mean, Peter, zooming in on it?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
And as shown here, the height of the building is at 42 feet. The roof line of St. Gregory's is around 46 feet, and the spire itself is 63 feet. And this is cutting east to west in the longest section of the building, which it does elongate in this view here. But if we go to the next slide, it's showing the cut from north to south, where it matches up to where, a more general sense of the neighborhood in terms of where we're looking at, or how it would be viewed from the street face. 173, 175 Main Street at 35 feet or so on the far left. 163 Main, the insurance building at 38.5 feet. 159 Main at 20.8 feet. Ours also at 42 feet. And then the building adjacent across the road is 139 Main at 19.4 feet.
I'd like to ask another question.
Yeah.
Just from a graphic design perspective, why are you using a design image here that appears to show grade halfway up the diagram instead of grade at the bottom of the diagram?
Just from a graphic design standpoint, we did want to show, that there's you kind of cut halfway down when you're showing a strip, especially a transect. You do want to show that there is grade changes. It's very hard to see just because of it's a very subtle grade change, but from left to right, there is a grade change in terms of where the grade does drop for our retaining wall, as well as there's a natural grade that changes as well.
Yeah, I worry a little bit that I'm not doing a good job of articulating my question. Let me just try one more time. If you look at that image, there's a large block of gray all along the bottom that
Yes.
is
Yep.
like a 40-foot deep basement, which I know it's not.
Right. Correct.
Right.
So
Well,
it's a little. Sorry to cut you off.
It's just a feature of how you're representing it, but I have to tell you, I'm a little bit concerned with this graphic design approach because I think it tends to minimize to the eye the changes in elevation on the effective part of the diagram. I'm a little worried about the way this is being represented and how the eye interprets it. So I'm hoping you can give me a better explanation of why you've chosen this representation.
Sure. Yeah. No. So anywhere you see that lighter gray on the lower portion is used for basically the passageway of cars or a driveway is what it's supposed to represent. The projector, as seen here, it does wash out a little bit of that gray, but we need to delineate between space between buildings as one kind of parametric item that we can look at, as well as the space between buildings that is just roadway or driveway that we want to kind of delineate to give a better sense of where things are and what's happening on these spaces. That's the reason.
Let me try just one more time. Just take an example of the large gray section underneath one of the buildings or the large light gray section underneath a car. Why is more than half of this graphic having no benefit to the viewer because it's just showing underground? I'm not talking about the space where the cars are parked. I'm talking about this huge gray block underneath the buildings. Why have you chosen to use this type of diagram with that large gray area under the buildings?
Right. As we're cutting through the earth here, it's what we've done is we've done our best to represent the distance between buildings as well as the height of the buildings. That from a graphic standpoint, just to address why there is that larger mass at the bottom, that's the darker shade of gray. It's to ground the graphic basically and kind of make sure that we know which way's down and which way's up.
I think it runs a risk of playing tricks on the eye and minimizing the actual distinction between heights of buildings. So I'm not a graphics design expert, but I just would tell you that I think you should exercise caution having a graphic like this because I think the way the eye interprets this tends to minimize the difference in heights between the buildings. So I appreciate your patience as I've tried to articulate my question. I'm worried about the way you've chosen to present this.
So I could say I don't agree that it minimizes it. I just don't. To be honest, I don't find this particularly useful as a graph. It's just confusing to me. I think hearing your explanation, I sort of get it, but to be honest, it's not a way that lay people I think are used to looking at a graph. So I think this is like a 3D kind of cross section thing, and it's confusing to me.
Right.
I think it's just confusing.
The goal. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Gene, can you lower that picture so we get rid of the brown at the bottom? Is this what Peter is looking for?
Ooh, a little too far.
What do you?
Right? Yeah, about there.
Is that better?
So the point of the graphic in the most basic sense is to get a sense of height of adjacent buildings in comparison to our building, right? The distances between the buildings are to scale. The distances in height are to scale.
Right.
They are blocky. They are shown, in one line type of drawing, but it is a section cut through many buildings that are surrounding the site that we want to represent in terms of how high up our building is compared to them, basically.
Well, so let's just use the numbers. St. Gregory's Church, how far is that from your building?
The actual distance.
Yep.
So that distance, based on this diagram here, it's to scale, it's drawn to scale, it's
Yeah.
not exact. What I'd have to do is I'd have to get,
Right, but do you know how far it is about?
in general, no, I do not, no. I have to figure that out.
All right, so, but St. Gregory's is 46 feet, your building's 42 feet. At St. Gregory's at the roof line, right? Yours is
Correct.
42. All right, and we have 149, or sorry, we have 26, 28 Second Street, that's at 33 feet. And then we had some other ones that we had on here.
Yeah, and keep in mind too that in terms of the building itself, what the downtown overlay district requires you to do is to push the building as far away from single-family residential buildings as possible, and that's why we've tucked the building at the corner of Second and Main to provide that distance between the existing single-family residential units, particularly 159 and 161, which are in the same district as we're in, but we're trying to respect what the bylaw is requiring us to do, is to maximize the separation.
Well, here, and we have, it looks like we have kind of a range of heights. We have, 139 Main Street's at 19.4. You're proposed at 42. Then we have 159, which is at 20. Then we have 163, which is at 38.5. And then we have 173, 175, which is at 35. So it's not like we have uniform heights across even this 6-building spread on Main Street. It looks like we're going up, we're going down, we're going up, we're going down. So, I think that, frankly, the numbers without the chart is probably more helpful. I think I appreciate what you were trying to do. It just confused me. So, but the numbers, I think, are helpful.
John, I appreciate your suggestion for Gene to lower the slide.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I was concerned about. And if you're going to use this graphic to articulate the project going forward, it really should be drawn the way it's presenting right now, because it's easier for the eye to interpret what it's trying to convey.
Noted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Okay. I think that's everything, right?
Sure
That's
is.
it.
Okay, so let's go to public comment, and you can comment. So the way this is going to work is if you have a public, Gina, any public comments come in to you?
No.
Okay, so if you have a public comment, I'd like you to come up to the podium, say your name and where you live, direct any questions or comments to me, and then if I can answer them, I will. Or if it's to another board member, that they will. If it's a question or a comment for the applicant to respond to, then I'll put it to them, okay? So that's how we'll work it. And it can be on anything we've talked about, or if anything that we haven't talked about, if there's something else you want to comment or question about that we haven't discussed. So the floor is open. Come on up, ma'am.
Ita, before it starts, would you mind just giving an idea of how many people are there?
That are not part of the... Could people raise your hand if you're here for this hearing but not part of the applicant team? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You don't all have to get up 11, 10 or 11, about a dozen, we'll say.
Thank you.
Yep. Hi,
Is this on?
it is.
Okay, it doesn't sound like it is. I am Kathleen Hale. I live at 41 Second Street, and I'm just going to go through a commentary that many of us agree with in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So for background, in 2017, the town was devising a master plan, and community input was sought at meetings and online in 2017. And the commentary from residents was recorded and posted online. And here are some of their concerns expressed in their own words. An increase in traffic congestion with more housing density would be problematic. The need to maintain the town's character by not overextending housing development. No more high-density housing projects. and a more vibrant downtown with more shopping options, not just salons and pizza parlors. And again, this is coming from 2017 commentary. But nevertheless, 192 apartments by Princeton Properties rose on Route 125. We will soon be feeling the effects of that and the 136 units by Minco across from the airport, as well as the 221 units by Avalon Bay behind Sutton Pond. That's a total of 549 units. The traffic and parking woes from the latter two projects have yet to be felt, but are certain to create congestion in the downtown area. So now we're considering another 24 units on a mere 2/3 of an acre in the heart of downtown. Nearby residents all agree that this is a major concern. Among the legitimate reasons why this overcrowding is a bad idea is the parking issue. And I realize a lot of work was put into the parking, but from someone who lives there, it is almost impossible to get out of 2nd Street right now. With parking allowed on both sides of the street, the other day I almost had to back up to leave 2nd Street. So I just throw that in there. Parking on this lot seems inadequate for the potentially 48 cars and trucks. Recently, a 3-unit condominium on 2nd Street was required to have 8 parking spaces to also accommodate visitors. That actually happens to be the condominium that I live in. In the case of this project, not only would that requirement be waived, but also the basic requirement of sufficient parking for the residents. And I do want to make a comment here. I heard someone speak about referring to Water Street for parking. My comment, and this is a personal comment, is human behavior doesn't allow that. People will not walk that far. Currently, and as I said this, cars parked on both sides of 2nd Street are making it impossible for 2 vehicles to pass at the same time. And with all of these vehicles from the 24 condos exiting onto 2nd Street as proposed in this project, the situation would become untenable. Clearly, the infrastructure does not allow for further residential development in this already saturated part of North Andover. Our concerns with adding the number of cars and occupants will lead, we hope not, to a decline in property values and the quality of life for all of us. And as such, we do not believe that this project is in the best interests of our town as it is being presented. I do have one question, and again, you can refer it where it needs to go.
Thank you.
How is a low-traffic generator defined? I heard that comment used, and I will be very interested in hearing the answer to that.
Okay, why don't we do that right now? Can we get our traffic engineer up? And you can sit or you can stay if you have any follow-up, but go ahead.
So all the traffic impact studies, basically the regulation or the regulator or the guidelines that we use are based from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And the need of a traffic study is usually deemed when a project generates 100 trips or more, peak hour trips. So our project is going to generate 40. That's basically half or less than half of what regularly triggers. There's multiple municipalities that only require a traffic study when a development generates 100 trips or more.
So, but is the definition, so in your slide it said that it's considered a low traffic generator. Is that a term of art from ITE? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If something is less than 100
Trips.
trips.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's a good question. All right. Anybody, and thank you for your comments. Does anybody else have a comment that they'd like to make or a question that they'd like to ask? Come on up.
Hi, Liesl McGregor. I live at 161 Main Street. Couple of questions on the parking. Has the parking on Water Street changed? That used to be residential parking. That was permit parking. That was my first question. And my second question was when they had the traffic and they were showing the parking spots, the second parking spot, actually the one you have in front of 149, I think it's the insurance company. The reason that one's always green is because there's a hydrant there, which makes me think that maybe There wasn't a lot of look. And my third question was, when was things gathered? We are in a parking ban in the winter that includes Main Street, something to think about. A lot of people aren't parking on Main Street because of the winter ban. So just a couple things.
Okay, so we can add, so the,
Residential parking only, if I may respond to that?
yes, please.
Water Street, one side is residential parking only, and the other side, I believe, is 2-hour.
Yes,
Two-hour
correct. So
parking.
the side of the residential, which is basically, we look at the map, will be kind of like the east side or the north side of Water Street, is restricted for residential only. We did not take into account those parking spaces. We did not include those parking spaces into our calculations. So it's basically only the parking spaces that abut the church, the St. Gregory's Church, which are restricted to 2 hours, like John said. Those are the only parking spaces that we took into account. So
And how many spaces are within that 200-foot radius, is it?
it's about 16 parking spaces.
By Water Street?
Yeah, from Water Street all the way. But within the 200-foot radius, we only counted 2.
Yeah, there's only 2 within the 200-foot radius. Yeah.
Correct.
And the traffic study dates, I'm just pulling them up, were October 22nd, October 25th, October 26th, and what were the dates in February?
14 and 15.
February 14th and February 15th. So those were,
Yeah.
those were the traffic study, and they were 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., was that right?
I think
then
the
on
parking
Sunday,
ban
we-
goes into effect per storm. So yesterday, it came out in an email that the parking ban went into effect. So I don't know if it's
Well, there's,
all
there's
winter
an
anymore.
there's an overnight winter parking ban, but that wouldn't be affected by this. And then there's a storm. Luckily, we've actually light on the winter, but those were the dates, October 22nd, 25th, 26th, 14th, and 15th.
Yeah, and on January 22nd was the Sunday that we collected as well.
And January 22nd. Okay. So those were the dates, just as a question. Another good question. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Shira Slater, 26 Second Street.
Welcome.
So apologies, I wasn't at the abutters meeting, so I'm curious what's happening with the property line on my property, the white vinyl fence. And if we want to discuss that at a later time, we can do that, set that up.
Yeah, so.
Is the fence staying, or?
Yes, so.
It is, okay.
Yeah, so we aren't showing any modifications to the fence. It's going to
Okay.
remain as it is. And then on our side of the property, we're putting some plantings in, some
Okay.
trees.
So the work will be on and the fence is staying. Okay, thank you very much. So there's one thing that I'd like to point out that you may not be aware of. So on the 26th, you've got my driveway. Typically, the town, when they do the snow removal on the street, at that area, that end of the town, a lot of the time the snow pile will end up on the right-hand side of the 26 property, you know, where that parking is, just on the left-hand side of your entrance. So I think that's just something that we need to be aware of, that that's kind of the existing area where the pile currently goes, because it's typically an available spot, you know, sort of snow-wise.
Okay.
So I'd just like to bring that to
And that's one thing
attention.
that is still actually outstanding, is just to get the okay on the snow removal plan, because that was something that we were concerned about, because it is a small space, whether or not there would be
Because
an
there aren't
adequate
that
plan.
many available spaces down there for the existing Second Street.
Okay, not a lot of room for snow removal on the street. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Good to know. Okay. Anybody else for tonight? Can also, you don't have to. There will be additional meetings if you want to make further comments, but can come up tonight. That's for sure. Hello
Good
again.
evening. Hello again. I'm Father Stepan Baljan. I live at 38 Green Hill Ave in North Andover, and also, like I said, with my other wife at 158 Main Street, St. Gregory Armenian Church. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I thank Mr. Smolak and the team that is representing the firm here today for this opportunity. I wanted to point out just a few observations, and then also I had a few questions, if I may. I just want to state to the planning board, just for the record, and this is not, in any way trying to demean character or anything like that or make any accusation. I just want to let everybody know that we at St. Gregory's were not contacted directly by Mr. Smolak or the firm, but we were invited by the neighbors to come, to the other abutters to come to meet up with them. And it's fine. It's over. I'm glad that we did. Glad that we had a chance to talk. Thank you, John. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. Also, one of the questions that I had, and it was answered, was on which Sunday was the study actually conducted. I'm a man of faith. I'm certainly not doubting anybody, but nobody recalls seeing anybody outside of our church that day. You know, hindsight is 20/20, but perhaps a knock on the door and a friendly handshake and a hi, we're here to do this study, might have been a missed opportunity to maybe further relations with us. But that's neither here nor there. During the meeting with the abutters, Mr. Smolak did suggest to us that an arrangement might be made for additional parking on Sunday mornings at Foster & Sullivan Insurance. This certainly is a suitable solution. I just wanted to note that while it's certainly possible and it would serve our needs in the place of losing the parking at the current site, that this parking lot is located farther away from our entrance, and it also lacks access to a crosswalk like we currently have now. But that's only one part of the issue for us. Like I had said last time.
But just, I mean,
yeah.
I'm just gonna cut you off there. I mean, with all due respect, that's not really an issue at all because they don't have to allow you parking now, right?
Nobody does. I understand that.
So-
I'm just saying that it was mentioned in the opening statement that they had a chance to meet with us
Yeah.
and go over some solutions or something like that. And that the extent of it was just simply, you might want to reach out to this place and ask if you can park there. So I'm just addressing that back. So
Okay.
apologize if that was rambling a little bit. But again, I want to reiterate, like I said at the last time I spoke, that's only one part of the equation for us. If the site gets sold and it's developed, then so be it. Our concern is with the use of the additional parking spaces on the street. And I'm glad to see that additional on-site parking spaces were created. Thank you for that. But I did have the question of what exactly is the model for determining that residential spaces will not be, quote unquote, at peak during the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. To me, this seems mostly speculative. Building's not built yet. The residents, whoever they are not living there yet. And I also wonder how this fits in with the new model post-pandemic, where a lot of people are not leaving for their jobs and driving, commuting to Boston or whatever at 8 a.m. every morning. They're working from home, either full-time or some days of the week. So I'm just wondering if that would be taken into consideration as well. My next question is, again, it seems purely speculative, but do we know what kind of businesses will occupy that we can somehow make an assumption that at 4 p.m. they're going to close down so the residents can come home and have their parking spaces? It seems like they would either need to be forced to be closed at that time, or that there might be a few hours of overlap between that 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. or whatever a business is going to close. This would also present a problem for us. Like, for example, this coming Friday, in 3 days, we'll have 35 to 40 people arriving at our church for a Lenten dinner and service on Friday night during Great Lent. So there might be, and that's right around 6 o'clock. So again, we're looking at sort of what, I understand the study, everything that was done, thank you, bravo, about parking and the usage. But to me, it doesn't quite seem to capture those times when there's going to be a lot of overlap and what I believe can only be characterized as competition for parking in the area. And also the same question remains as to, will these businesses be open on Sundays? I think that's a huge question that, again, I don't know if the team can answer that because those businesses are not in existence yet and they're not at that site, but it's something that we would be very nervous about. It was mentioned that parking on Water Street is usable on Sunday, and it was clarified that the one side of the street is limited parking, the other side is residential parking by permit. But it was mentioned in the traffic report that the average number that was that came up about usage was an average of Saturday and Sunday. The previous paragraph mentioned that Sunday was pretty dead around here, Sunday in the afternoon or evening or whatever. And so again, for us, with our chief operation being on Sunday, we would like to see some better data about Sunday and about those peak times of usage, because just to tell us that it's an average of Saturday and Sunday, it doesn't give us a clear picture of the usage on Sunday. And lastly, I'd like to know, for an example, like a day like today, the town offices were closed. I believe it was a snow emergency or parking ban. When there is a parking ban in the town, how are the additional residents or the additional customers of the commercial buildings supposed to handle the parking? Where are they supposed to park, in other words? So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, the data is from ITE, right? So it's based on the International Traffic Engineers. Does it? I don't think I think it's pre-COVID, right? I don't think they've made adjustments for COVID as far as I
Not
know.
yet.
Not yet, right?
Not yet. So the data, so there's different manuals from ITE that they publish, and it's basically updated every 3-4 years. So the last one was updated in 2020, but with pre-COVID data. And the way that we can determine how many, or the usage of the parking spaces, and the same as the expected trips, is that they subdivide each category by what they call land use codes. So based on the land use code, in this case, we are basically a mid-rise or low-rise residential unit with what we call like a strip plaza, which is basically a commercial site that is less than 40,000 square feet. That's kind of like the category that we're in. So for each of those categories, they will tell you not only the peak demand, it's basically they will tell you hourly how is the distribution of traffic and parking going to be on the site. So hour by hour, we can determine how many parking spaces will be on site or will be outside and things like that for not only the trips coming in and coming out, but also parking spaces being occupied.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any board member questions or comments. Peter, Kelly, anything? Sean, anything?
Good.
It's more around, general traffic and kind of similar questions that have come up before with different units. I mean, it certainly seems that in various forms we hear from people about, kind of ad hoc traffic concerns, throughout the town and getting from point A to point B. And I know last year we had talked about doing a larger kind of baseline traffic study with looking to see, what were those common trips through town so that we would have kind of actual data that we all agreed with and kind of understood, with factual traffic count data, what it took, what the average kind of North Andover person took from going to point A to point B. And I know that got started and then there was feedback and it stopped. Is there any kind of discussion or potential of picking that back up again and getting to the point where we have factual data versus, all of our kind of ad hoc experiences with traffic and concerns?
Jean?
It certainly can be picked back up. It was stopped when Rural Crest didn't move forward, and we decided to wait until Avalon, Minco, and Avalon Phase 2 become close to fully occupied.
That's right. Okay.
And
I knew there was a reason, but I couldn't remember
yep,
what it was.
so Avalon's 170 unit, both have COs, but they're not fully occupied by any means. Phase 2, I think this summer we'll be seeking a Phase 2. Minco, one building has a CO, the other two buildings do not yet, so.
Because as we look at all these things, right, we all know that we look at, this makes perfect sense to the applicant to look at a particular location and piece, but as we, especially as we hear from abutters and kind of their concerns, to be able to have that factual information of how do people really travel and what are they really doing? I just think the more factual data that we can have to have a holistic picture of how, just to help residents understand and kind of either have real concerns or, factual data to show that there isn't concerns, whichever way it goes, could only be to, everyone's benefit.
Yeah, I think we had talked about it, and then when the Royal Crest project didn't happen, then it didn't make sense to necessarily do it right now, because then we'd want to do it again after these other apartments come online. So the idea was to kind of to wait and and have as much data as possible with these kind of 2 or 3 larger ones being completed and filled. So I think it's still good. Yeah,
I can see it's one of those things where we've got to do it at some point, because
Right.
things are just going to keep happening, and if we can. Yeah, we have those traffic studies that were done for all of those. So even if we use can plug assumptions in for those until we have factual data and kind of continue to move forward, at least then we've got a baseline. Because right now it's still, I don't know. I was one of the people that talked about Sunday traffic. Right, that's my ad hoc experience, not real data. But if we could get something that we could stand factual data that every resident could agree with for moving back and forth within the town, I think it would only benefit.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding tonight or this project? Kelly?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Peter, anything else for tonight?
No, nothing further, thank you.
Okay. John, you said no?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, so here's Gene. Well, Gene, what are next steps? Or is there anything outstanding?
Yep, so this updated traffic utilization study is been sent to the peer reviewer, so we're waiting a response on that.
Yeah.
Stormwater has closed out, and for the most part, all department review comments have closed out, with the exception of fire department confirming.
Okay. Any timeline on the peer review comments on the traffic?
I expect to have it by the next meeting, which is only next Tuesday, but
So here was my thought, is that next Tuesday I'd like to have a full board discussion of where we're at, take any additional comments that come in. So if any members of the public, whether here or watching at home or listening sometime in the future, have any additional comments or questions, I'd love to have them before the next meeting or at the next meeting. But I'd like to have a full kind of board discussion of where we're at with this, and then from there give Gene a sense of what kind of decision we could potentially draft up for the 21st. So I'd like to have at least one more meeting where we hear public comments, keep it open till the 21st, obviously, if more comments come in. But I'd like to be prepared and hopefully have everyone here next Tuesday, so that we can have kind of a full discussion of where we're at with that, and then move towards closing the public hearing on the 21st and voting on a decision. Anybody have questions or issues with that? Does that make sense for everybody? John?
Yeah.
Kelly, Peter?
Yes.
Make sense? Okay, so that'll be the plan. So we will continue this public hearing to the 21st. Again, I'm sorry, to the 7th. If you are, want to have offline discussions, if you're a butter and want to have offline discussions with the applicant, please give them your information, get their information, so that you can do that in the interim, just in case there are other site specific to your plot that you want to discuss. Not that they'll necessarily make any changes, but I think it's been helpful in getting us further along in the process.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
Just to me, if I may make a couple comments.
Sure?
In terms of the fire department, I'm hoping that they'll respond very shortly, because I don't think they'll have issues, but obviously I can't speak for the fire department as well as tech. I mean, that response may come in within a matter of a couple of days, and I'm just wondering whether it would be possible to even get the decision started now, and with the understanding that
So here's the issue. I think we may be able to come up with it, but there's 2 reasons that I don't want to do that. One is we haven't had a full board discussion on it, and if there are things that I want to have the flexibility to change things if there are. 2, it's been a while since it's been back before us, and now we have tonight where the buildings were closed all day, we have snow issues and things like that. I'd like to give another opportunity for there to be public comment before we draft a decision. So for those reasons, respectfully, I'm going to say we're going to give it till next week and then give it the additional 2 weeks. You're right that we may be prepared technically to vote on it by the 7th, but in fairness, if there was someone who couldn't be here tonight because of snow, and we've only had this meeting since we were met, 2 months ago, I'd like to give people opportunity to come in and give their feedback and give us the chance, if we want, to incorporate that into any decision before we make it. So,
Fair enough, thanks.
yeah. Okay, so March 7th for this one. All right? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to new public hearings, annual town zone bylaw amendment articles. Is there a new public hearing thing that I need to read for this, or?
You typically read the top of the agenda when you open a new hearing.
Yeah, so I'll do that in a minute. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Okay. Pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2002, this public hearing of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and our parties with the right and a requirement to attend this public hearing can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, in-person attendance, the members of the public and board members will be permitted. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting live may do so on the televisions by tuning into Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26 or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceeding as soon as possible after the meeting. If members of the public would like to participate in public hearings but not attend the meeting in person, please email your question or comment prior to or during the meeting to Jean Enright at jenright@northandoverma.gov. Their question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. We have no one here for these public hearings, Kelly, just so you know. It's completely empty. Okay, floodplain, anything? Well, I guess we should do, since it's a public hearing, give us a summary and let's present what the article is.
Okay, so I open first the
Inclusionary, fine, inclusionary housing.
Inclusionary housing, yep.
Yep.
So, I've not received any public comment. The draft article has been put in warrant format, so additions identified as underlined and deleted text as strike-through. It's in the same form that you've been reviewing for the past, I think, 2 months now. Like I said, I've had no public comment, and I have shared it with Edgewood, who operates the CCRC, and they have given no feedback either. And so the intent of this article is to refer back to Article 13, I'm sorry, for the inclusionary housing bylaw. Continuing care retirement centers are applicable, and so if they were to construct more units, they'd be susceptible to the inclusionary housing requirement for 8 or more units. But however, we do already have an Article 13 in our zoning bylaw, which is specific to continual care retirement centers. That article has a provision for density bonuses as well as payment in lieu. And so what we've done is separated out CCRC's requirements for density and payment in lieu and point back to Article 13, which again is specific to CCRCs.
So CCRCs will still have an inclusionary
Yep.
required component, which they already had.
Yep.
But instead of going under the inclusionary
Payment in lieu calculation.
we're just going back to the original calculation that we already had in the bylaw
Yep.
before we drafted the inclusionary.
Yep. And they have paid in lieu in the past.
Yep.
And I would anticipate they'd pay in lieu again.
Yep.
And this the requirement for the percentage of units to be dedicated as affordable is 15% in traditional developments. It's 5% in this type of development, and that's because they're unique in terms of they offer all kinds of services and their payments are just different than a regular market rate house would be.
And there was I think there was another, like a housekeeping item in this that we said that it applies to subdivisions, right?
Yep. And so last year, we did not include subdivisions, and this year, we're introducing them into the applicability section. And other bylaws include subdivision.
And
so-
I thought ours had too. I thought we had put it in there. So that was always my understanding that they would for 8 or more. Okay.
And they don't have a provision, CCRCs no longer have a provision to build off-site, because again, that just didn't make sense. So either they construct on-site or pay in lieu. Is another minor edit. So I consider it really mostly housekeeping.
Okay. Questions, comments? Okay, let's go to the next.
So the next is the floodplain. And again, it's in the same form as you've seen it, other than I put it into warrant format with an introductory paragraph and explanation. And for the most part, the intent of this is to keep us in compliance with the National Flood, make sure I say it right in the explanation, plan program, I think it's called.
So,
National Flood Insurance Program.
Right. In order to have flood insurance, we have to have a bylaw that matches the federal regulations.
Yep.
And flood insurance is required in many parts of the town that are in the floodplain. And so when people need flood insurance, and they have to have it for their mortgages, and we don't have a bylaw, then they won't be able to get it. So we need to just make sure our bylaw matches up with federal regulations.
Yes.
And Amy and Jean, and with the help of our consultant, have put this together to match the.
Yeah, so we sent it to DEP
Yeah.
to review the draft that we had. I will say when it was presented, if you remember, Amy Maxner, the Conservation Administrator, was here, and she talked about a permit would be required. And my interpretation was that it would be an additional permit. We could build it within our permitting system, but it's not. It's the normal building permit that would have to be issued for any construction within the floodplain. And the.
Just checks off.
Yeah.
Just another box to check off.
That meets the requirements of the floodplain bylaw.
Okay.
Just like he does for the zoning bylaw.
Gene, just a quick question, because I remember, if I recall, Amy mentioning that as part of this, the reason what kind of triggered to take a look at this was that new FEMA maps were going to be issued?
They're going to be issued as well, and we
Okay.
need to adopt this ahead of the FEMA maps.
Okay.
She had first said, I think, that they would be issued this summer, but they're not issued this summer. I think we have a longer period of time, but it was
Okay.
just good practice to get it adopted.
Got it.
And no, I take it we've had no public comment about this thrilling bylaw.
We checked, but we have not. No.
Okay. Haven't been flooded with comments? It's been no
Yeah.
deluge.
Yes, the approach we
It was
took.
a long day.
Yeah.
So the approach we took was to strike the entire existing bylaw and replace it, because not only is additional language added, a lot's carried forward, but other things are just reordered, and so it was just a mess to do it in red line.
Yep.
And so I had to work on the introductory paragraph, which essentially, it's usually just deleting and adding text, but it's by obsoleting existing text, carrying forward applicable text, and identifying new text added as underlined.
Okay. All right. Inclusionary check, floodplain check, site plan review, Dover bylaw.
That's the one I've not opened yet, so give me 1 second. Okay, so as you know, I've created a new application to account for a limited site plan review, which is, again, the intent to separate out Dover protected uses from the special permit requirement under our existing site plan review. The one, I think, outstanding issue was, there was concern that we specifically state that watershed special permits are included, would still be required, and I've added under 820 to make it more specific. Where a special permit, including but not limited to a watershed special permit, is required, or a variance from the zoning bylaw is requested in connection with any action subject to limited site plan review for religious, blah, 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 that these provisions of the zoning bylaw still apply, subject to the provisions in the purpose of 818.
Okay.
So, I mean, there might be a lot of other cases where special permits are still required,
Right.
but this at least gets the watershed under that provision.
So the way it would work is that if you're a religious institution, per se, and you're going to build, you would go to the building inspector and say, I'm doing this use, and he would look at it and say, okay, this is either Dover or not Dover. If it's not Dover, then you have to get whatever permitting is required. If it's Dover, you still have to, if you're in the watershed or other, if you're whatever other permitting, but you don't need to get a special permit. Instead, you go through this Dover limited site plan review.
Yep, so it's still a formal process before the planning board.
Yep.
There'll still be a decision. They have to, if they can, they have to meet your reasonable regulations. And so we have a zoning bylaw, we have reasonable regulations. If they can at all comply with those, they have to. If they can't comply with those, you can't deny them, but you get to at least review it and maybe condition things.
Okay.
Okay, the only other, I believe the only other change I've made since you've reviewed the draft is adding a waiver request.
Just like we would for special permit waivers.
Well, I added this into the site plan review special permit because we never formalized it. And for the limited site plan review application, I added it, and so that people can, it's just never been formal. I just tell people, well, if you don't want a traffic study, ask for the waiver and the board will review it. So this kind of formalizes it and just tells them they can request waivers if they'd like to.
Okay.
And then it'll be
Which makes
reviewed as
sense.
part of the application.
Which makes sense. I mean, we did like a waiver for a childcare center special permit recently, right?
Yep.
Right. So it's something we would normally grant on a special permit, so I think that makes sense.
So that provision's there, but this is more specific to if they don't want to do a traffic study or have a fiscal impact
fiscal,
study,
yeah.
they don't think it's warranted. The storage didn't do a full-blown traffic
Right.
study. They requested it, but this just puts it in the bylaw
That you can do, request
that they
a
can
waiver.
request.
Okay. Questions or comments on this? Okay, no, all right.
Okay, and so, in your packet, I have introduced 3 additional zoning bylaws. Unfortunately, I've stated in the past that the current zoning bylaw allows for daycares, but it allows it by special permit in almost every single zoning district. And so I researched that just to see if I could shed some light on why daycares, why not religious and educational uses, like why was it specific to daycare? And I found in 1985, there were 3 warrant articles presented by the planning board, one of which was to establish a definition for daycare center. One was to add the permitted use by special permit in, like I said, almost every zoning district. And one was to update the table of uses to specify special permit in almost every single zoning district. Based on that, and now that we're introducing the Dover Amendment, it just doesn't make sense to have them come through the Dover process and say, you have to go get a special permit through the ZBA. And so I've introduced 3 that, one deletes the definition, and the definition will be located within the Dover bylaw instead. One adds, unfortunately, and this is kind of a longer story, but the Dover Amendment has added definitions since 1985, and one of which is a child care facility rather than a daycare center. And the child care facility includes not only a daycare center, but I don't have it in front of me, but like a small school-type definition and a large family daycare. And so those are all incorporated into the new definition, which is child care facility. And so the amendment would strike out child care center and by special permit, and just simply replace it with childcare facility, which is what is defined in our new bylaw. And then the table of use, in doing this, I actually found some existing errors, but for the most part, it strikes special permit across every zoning district and adds a Y for yes, they're allowed, but they'd go through the Dover process. CDD 1 and CDD 2, although CDD 2 had said special permit, it is not in the section, so it does not allow for daycares, so I struck it and put a no. CDD
Is that right
1
that we don't want daycares in CDD
I
2?
think it's because of the lot sizes, so CDD 1 and 2 are from Starbucks on Route 114 to the car wash.
Did they exist before? No,
They didn't exist.
so we
at the time.
created them and didn't put childcare
Didn't put
centers?
childcare center. In 1 or 2, but we did in 3. And 3s just have much larger lot sizes. 1 and 2 are only an acre, and they're just not deep lots. And 1 and 2 were all intended to protect the surrounding neighborhoods behind them. And like I said, it's the stretch from Hillside Road and Starbucks to about Stop and Shop, just shy of Stop and Shop on one side. I think the car wash is included. If not, McGregor Fence is the last parcel. So I'm indifferent, but how it's presented today isn't correct. So if we want it, yes, we can make it yes, but I'd have to add it in the narrative, in the article itself.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I mean, it seems kind of strange to me that it's allowed everywhere else in town, but not there. I mean,
So
Yeah,
the,
unless we knew why it was excluded for a particular reason, I don't know why we would.
I don't know, maybe John has a,
yeah, I just think it's the traffic on 114 coming and going for a daycare. And
but we have, I mean, just given the other stuff, we've been opening it up to retail, to businesses.
yeah, most recently it was chimney sweep, a
Right.
pest control. Like, that doesn't have a lot of people coming and going, it's more employees.
But there's so many people already. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I don't feel like it's a great spot for a childcare center, but I feel like the people that would go there are the people that are going to be driving past there anyway. Like, how many people are going to make extra trips for that? I don't know. I don't think it would be a large.
If somebody could combine lots,
Right.
it might make more sense, but until somebody can do that, I don't.
Is there if it was a yes, would there, under our Dover, are there lot size requirements or things like that?
If it's a residential zone, a minimum of 10,000 square feet, but this
Yeah.
isn't residential.
Right, but, okay, but like, if we said yes, you could have a childcare facility in CDD, would there be there has to be some sort of requirement, just the setback requirements then maybe?
Again, you can reasonably regulate lot size and setbacks.
Right.
And so specific to daycare, there were these 3 conditions. But they were specific to residential or abutting residential parcels.
Does CDD do those abut residential?
They do be to the rear.
Right, so it would qualify under that.
Yep.
I mean, it may be that you don't even have,
You can't do it.
right.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm indifferent. I just was trying to clean it up.
It doesn't seem to make sense to me, but at the same time, I don't know that I want to make a change without like
Fully understood.
thoroughly researching it.
Yeah.
So why don't we leave it as is, and if someone comes to us ever and says, hey, we want to open a daycare center, then maybe we can review it.
Yeah, but I guess, wouldn't we have to, if we're gonna make CCD2 a yes, wouldn't we have to make CCD1 a yes?
We don't have to do
Right,
it.
yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like.
I
for-
would, yes, I would
for-
do it across the board.
Yeah, so,
I would make it across the
Because
board.
it used to be one side required 2 acres, I think, and the other 1, but 3-4 years ago,
Right.
we changed that. We
I mean,
made
that's
them both the
thing is
same.
We've been, I mean, that's the path that we've been on, is kind of trying, because these CDDs were designed to encourage additional business and traffic and people using the stuff on 114, and it seems like it wasn't super effective, so
Yeah.
we've been kind of tinkering with it to allow for more things.
It was supposed to be more of a transition zone. that
Right.
Allowed for commercial.
And I could see like a home daycare, like in one of those houses or something like
Yeah.
that, you know, because is the hospice still, you know?
That's
on-
not in CDD 1.
No, that's not, that's the end.
No, that's across from Burger King, that one.
Right.
Yeah, that's like business 4, I want to say.
Okay, so it's more,
It's really from Hillside Road and Starbucks going towards Stop and Shop. It's
okay, but
pretty
like,
limited.
so is the new dollar store, is that in there, or is that?
Nope.
No, so further down?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so there's not a lot there.
No. They're mostly residences that potentially could convert to business,
Right,
so.
okay. Well, let's talk about it again. I think I'd be in favor of just
Yeah.
making them all yeses. But
We can talk about it next week, but
yeah, I'd
the
like
only
to, I'd like
other-
to get John's input on that.
Yep. The only other housekeeping is Osgood Smart Growth is still in our bylaw, so although there was an effort to rescind it, It hasn't been. So technically, it's in existence. And again, in the business opportunity zone, the table currently has an N, and yet the narrative has it being allowed. And so I'm just housekeeping, changing it to Y.
And so the purpose behind all of these three and the Dover one, is to say, these three in conjunction with the Dover amendment, the Dover bylaw, is to say, okay, childcare facilities are now allowed pretty much, across the board under this Dover structure.
And they
Right.
always
And they
have
always
been.
were.
Yeah.
They always
That's
really
the thing.
were,
Yeah.
but now we're formalizing that.
And we're removing the special permit requirement. That's kind of the key.
Right. Which is what the law.
And so it's all housekeeping to kind of take 1985 and reverse it back.
Okay. Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
And I think that, I know we talk about the traffic and stuff like that, but the ability to have, and these daycares, they have to be licensed and things like that for them
Right.
to count. So
Yeah.
I just think giving more types of options for different people for daycares is a good thing.
Yep.
So,
And so, assuming you're supportive of the three, those have to be noticed now because they weren't in our original
Right.
notice for public hearing. And I could get that notice, I can send it to the Tribune this week. The public hearing would open on March 21st, which is the day you're scheduled to vote or make recommendations on the three we already discussed. And so hopefully those can align and have them ready for the warrant.
that's fine. And but we can also continue this as a discussion
Yep,
item.
on the
so
next
that we
agenda.
can discuss it with the public hearings
Yep,
that are open.
definitely discussion item again on the next
Yeah.
agenda when everybody's here.
Okay.
Okay, and lastly, again, another proposed warrant article that's kind of crept up here is for the continuing care retirement center. And the amendment is specific to the very first section, which is permitted districts and special permit required.
Gene, can you tell us a little bit about, so Gene and I have discussed this one and kind of workshopped some of this language, but it's come about for a very specific reason. So I think it would be helpful for board members and members of the public to know where this is coming from.
Yep. So again, if you're supportive, this would also require a public hearing and could get noticed along with the three that we just discussed and be ready for March 21st. So Edgewood Retirement Community was permitted as a CCRC approximately 16 years ago. It consists of 284 uses, inclusive of the recently constructed Woodlands End. So if you remember,
284 units?
284 total, inclusive of Woodlands End, which is 40 units, and those were constructed, I think, in 2018. They required bylaw amendments to allow for them. And so due to market demand, Edgewood is considering expanding its operation to a second parcel of land located in North Andover. This parcel would contain approximately 76 dwelling units. However, it would not contain a nursing facility. And so they're in active discussions with a property owner to purchase another separate parcel. CCRCs are required to be on a single lot, and so this would be their second CCRC. So Edgewood's intention would be to affiliate the proposed CCRC with the existing nursing care facility located at 575 Osgood Street. All other bylaw requirements could be met on the new parcel. So current.
So the reason we need a potential bylaw change is this bylaw, basically the CCRC, the idea was, okay, we have a nursing home facility, and that's on your lot, and then we're surrounding the nursing home facility with different things that people there may need or would benefit. So it's beneficial to have all these things together, right? So you have the nursing home facility, but you also have assisted living, you have townhomes, you have different kind of levels. You also have medical care. You have different things where you can kind of get all of your attention all in one spot for different levels of care and basically move throughout that system.
Age in place,
Right.
they refer to it, so.
Okay,
it's
so that's a good, that's
The
a really.
ability to age in place.
Right. But it requires there to be a nursing home facility on the actual site. Now, what they want to do is locally in town have another lot where they have these types of elderly housing, but not actually have the nursing home there. So if they need the actual nursing home, which I guess is not as in demand, they would just kind of go over to that. But it would be pretty beneficial, I think, for the town to have this, but it doesn't quite jive exactly with the ongoing bylaw. So that's why we've kind of tried to craft this adjustment to it that allows for the continued age in place. You know, sometimes you may need services where you just call into the nursing home or a shuttle bus back and forth, but not actually be in there.
Just
or some of the other
rehab
facilities.
facility.
Or
They have,
rehab, right.
they have the Meadows, which, you know, people from outside Edgewood get assigned there for rehab and get discharged, so.
So this would allow them to have an affiliated second lot, but then still meet this, as long as it meets this all this other criteria, which it does.
And depending on how you read it, it may already, I mean, it provides a provision to affiliate a nursing home.
Right.
But it's just not clear, and I think it would benefit to clarify it.
So just to confirm, nursing homes aren't covered by the Dover Amendment?
Correct.
Okay, so this is completely distinct from any cleanup work.
To a degree, so disabled people are protected, but in our bylaw, that's never come up as being specific to Dover.
Got it.
And yeah, we were going through this bylaw, and Gina and I have been through it a bunch of times, her more than I. It's possible that you could read it, that this would be allowed without the amendment. I just don't think the bylaw was very clear in that, and I think this is just a better way, if we're in favor of that, to go about it. Also to clarify, because the bylaw currently says you can have these other types of housing if you're affiliated with a nursing home, but that doesn't mean, you could be affiliated with a nursing home in California.
Yeah.
That doesn't meet the intent of our bylaw. So the way we kind of change it is that you have to be affiliated with an existing nursing home in North Andover. That way, it's really limited to, okay, the idea is you have these houses, and these housing are affiliated with somewhere here in town, not that you're transporting these people or just doing telehealth stuff and trying to get advantage of the CCRC when you're not actually affiliated with something in town. So it's pretty limited to who it could apply to. It's only people that have a CCRC already in town. So that's Edgewood, and is there one more?
Brightwood,
And
Brightview.
Right.
I
So
believe it's
those are the
CCRC.
only ones that it would even apply to at the moment. So that was a second reason why we wanted to kind of take a stab at a cleanup.
And market demand's there. I mean, Edgewood's at 100% capacity. They have a wait list, I forget, of 70 people or something
Wow.
to get in, and they're under construction in Londonderry. I forget how many units, but this past December, they were at 100% capacity, and it's not opening till, I think, this coming December. So the market's certainly there for them. It's warranted. What they've claimed is the nursing care facility market has diminished, and it's going to continue to diminish. That people are finding other ways to stay at home or age in place.
And it's a pretty low impact on the town. I mean, traffic-wise, certainly it's a low impact. I mean, it does have impact on fire, ambulance, stuff like that. But I mean, it's an important service, I think, for our town. I mean, one of the things, listen, there are a lot of housing things that people disagree on, but the need for elderly housing and affordable housing, which this would also include, I think everyone in town kind of agreed that having more places would be beneficial. So, so that's So I'm definitely in support of kind of changing the bylaw to clarify and allow for this type of additional use with the affiliated.
Okay.
And just being more specific. Kelly, Peter, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. It makes perfect sense.
Peter?
Nothing else, thanks.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Okay, so
so I'll
let's
plan to notice them as sponsored by the planning board.
yes, please.
Okay. What else we got?
I think that's it. Meeting minutes. Can get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 7th.
So moved.
We'll get Peter as the mover. Sean, wanna-
Second.
All in favor. Peter,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
I vote yes. Anything before we adjourn?
Gene, do you want to give any update on 400 Great Pond, or is that not needed?
We had a public input meeting. I thought it was a really good public input meeting. About 30 people attended. We presented a video of the property. Peter narrated the video, kind of walked them through exterior as well as interior. We did a presentation kind of what we've learned, so cost to date, projected cost, upgrades that would be needed if we were to entertain some type of public use, explain the conservation restriction that exists on the property, which is held by Greenbelt. I think it went really, really well and very participatory. So people had a lot of questions, a lot of comments. I think they learned a lot. We have a meeting this Thursday night to kind of start forming some thoughts that the committee has now at this point.
And so when
I'd just chime in. I totally agree with Jean. Really good turnout and really helpful discussion. The one other point I would add to Jean's summary of what we presented was, so far the committee's come up with 5 guiding principles of things we should keep in mind as we develop recommendations. I'll see if I can remember all 5 off the top of my head, and Jean can help if I don't. One is protect the resource, the lake as our drinking water supply. That's the only one that's in a priority order. The others are no particular order. Potential, think about open space, think about recreational, assess historic value, and then lastly, or not lastly, but among the 5 is fiscal responsibility, and whatever we recommend, that it's something that the town would consider to be affordable and would use funds.
Okay, I'd say when it gets to a point when we're getting to maybe something concrete, maybe put it on the agenda and come back and give the board an update, but when it's appropriate.
Yep.
Okay, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We get a second?
Second.
All in favor, Kelly?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
I vote yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks.